America says, we will give you opportunity, but you've got to earn your success. You're competing against young people in Beijing and Bangalore. You know, they're not hanging out. They're not getting over. They're not playing video games. They're not watching Real Housewives. I'm just saying, it's a two-way street.
I'm just saying that's all. A live look at the White House on this last day of July. That was the president last week at the National Urban League's annual conference in New Orleans. And that's, of course, when the president announced his White House initiative to help African-American students achieve higher goals in education. With us now to talk about that and much more, president of the National Urban League, Marc Morial. Marc, you know, we hear many contrasts, not many of them positive, between the excitement around the president in 2008 versus the excitement around the president 4 years later when he's running for re-election. How was the president received at your conference? Is the excitement still there?
I'll tell you, the excitement was incredible, and I think what the video clip didn't capture is the president was actually talking to about 500 teenagers who were in the audience at the conference, because when he walked in, they went wild. I mean, they were wildly enthusiastic about the opportunity to see a president and to see Barack Obama. So that conversation was a bit of a colloquy, which was going on between them and the president at our conference. But he was well received. And, you know, think about it. The opportunity for people to see a president in person, you know, for some of us, you know, it's common, but many people may get one chance in life. One chance in life. So he was well received, and I thought his message was not only the education message, but he did talk about violence, and he also talked about his record, and made a few points.
Mr. Mayor, let's talk about that for a second, if that's okay. Let's talk about his record, and of course, it had to be so exciting for those students to see the president. You're exactly right. So glad you gave them that opportunity. But let's talk about the president's record. Obviously, for African Americans especially, but for all Americans, this has been a tough 3-4 years. Is there a growing sense of frustration that this president and this White House is not able to do more to help African Americans in the economic plight that they've been suffering through
I think,
over the past several years?
You know, Joe, it's a very fair question, and I'd make 3 points. One, I think the audience and the community and the constituency of the Urban League is mindful that things are better today than they were in 2009, no doubt, by every measure, by every stretch. Number 2, that things are not where we would like them to be in urban communities and in African American communities. But then number 3, I think the constituency understands the narrative of the Congress, understands the role the Congress has played or not played, and that the president is the president, not the emperor, not the king, and therefore it takes a combination in order to be able to move meaningful initiatives. And I don't think that's lost on an audience like the Urban League audience, which is, I think, a sophisticated audience that follows public affairs and follows public events.
Well, in the Urban League report last week, you allude to hidden swing voters. I mean, who are they?
You know what? There's this interesting thing that happened in 2008 where you had voter turnout, governor equality. In other words, African American and whites turned out almost at the same level. And if you compare that to 2000 and 2004, what that did is it made a significant difference in the outcome of the election in Ohio, in Virginia, in North Carolina, and in Indiana, and played an important role in states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. So the idea that these voters who are not thought of as swing voters, if they turn out in 12 like they did in 8, then it's going to have a material impact on some key states.
If they turn out.
If they turn out, and I believe they will, and I don't know if you've noticed this, Mark, but African Americans come up to me and grab my arm and say, we can't let them lose. And I think there's a sense that the president hasn't accomplished all that they would have hoped. But that I think the third point you made is a good point. Black voters are sophisticated enough to understand that he's been up against a very difficult obstructionist Congress, and they don't hold him accountable, and they want him to have a second 4 years, an additional chance. So I expect the turnout in places like Philadelphia to be every bit as high as it was 4 years ago.
And the biggest concern that I have in that area, I think enthusiasm will grow across the electorate after we get past Labor Day and the Olympics and the convention. But our continuing concern, it was a big part of the conversation in New Orleans, was the voter ID loss. And the spate that all of a sudden you've had 40 new voter ID proposals since 2009, if you will, and that people ask the question, why, and why now is there all of a sudden all of these new laws, new ways, new restrictions, new things. People are saying, did I miss something? Did I miss some voter impersonation scandal? Did I miss some problem?
And I think there's another thing that African Americans understand, and that's alternative. If you look at what happened even just this past week with Mitt Romney, there were two significant gaps that I think were not lost on African Americans. One was the Anglo-Saxon comment that he made over in London, but the second one was that culture comment dealing with when he was inside of Israel. What I mean by that is this: how can you be part of a larger solution if you don't even understand the context of the problem? And so for him to talk about economic disparities and chalk it up to culture, I think then the question then has to ask, well, women make 77 cents to the dollar to every man. What's the rationale behind that difference? When you look at the fact that economic disparities in this country, particularly amongst African Americans and Latinos, is the highest that it's been since the Great Depression, what do you chalk that up to? And because the question is, if you don't even understand the context of what you chalk it up to, how in the world can you be part of a larger solution to actually decrease that gap? And I think that's something that is not lost on African Americans, specifically.
But Wes, I'm sorry, Wes, let me interrupt. I understand your point, but has that gap increased or decreased since January the 20th, 2009? Have the rich gotten richer and the poor gotten poorer since January 20th, 2009? I mean, if you're talking about a disparity gap, and I'm just asking you factually, hasn't that just increased since Barack Obama's been president of the United States?
No, factually it hasn't. Factually it has increased, but I think it also goes back to President Morial's point of what are the causes, what are the reasons that we've seen such a significant increase in terms of this disparity gap? Have we not?
But you're talking about Mitt Romney. You can't blame Mitt Romney for what's happened over the past 4 years with the disparity gap. If Barack Obama gets the disparity gap in a way that you're suggesting that Mitt Romney does not, and I'm not arguing that point, I'm just asking you, why doesn't Barack Obama do something about it? I mean, it seems to me you can't attack Mitt Romney for what's been happening over the past 4 years in this area.
You can't attack Mitt Romney for what's been happening in the past 4 years, but what you can attack is the fact that if you're applying for the job of Commander-in-Chief, you're applying for the job of President of the United States, and you've shown that you don't even have a context of where these gaps are coming from and how exactly to attack the gaps, then what exactly is going to be your plan to help decrease them? That's one thing that President Obama has done, not just on the campaign trail back in 2008, but even since. In the laws that he has put forward and the things that he has actually tried to address, he's actually tried to go over some of those core elements that has created massive disparity gaps within everything from education. If you look at the brand new commission that was just put in place that President Hrabowski is going to be in charge of, if you're looking at everything from sentencing issues, etc., the president has actually tried to put together policies. And so even though people understand the realities and people understand the complexities of Congress, the complexities of how exactly with this multi-cameral system of government, they also understand the fact that if you're listening to Mitt Romney talk about economic disparities are caused by culture, then you don't necessarily have a champion that's going to fight to address a lot of these issues.
Culture. I mean, culture. We can have the debate on what causes economic disparity. I would guess economists have probably looked at different cultures across the world, and I'm sure that does go into part of the discussion. But again, economic disparity explodes when the economy gets worse, and unfortunately, when the economy gets worse, who suffers the most? African Americans.
Yeah, I think
and other minorities. It's not just specifically what a president is willing to do to focus on one group or another. You have to look at the macro picture as well. And if the economy continues to slide over 3 or 4 years, sadly, in this country we have seen it's African Americans who suffer the most. And the president certainly has to take some responsibility for that, Mr. Mayor, does he not?
Yeah, look, the president does sort of co-own, because Congress co-owns, the Federal Reserve co-owns the condition of the economy. I think the important thing to recognize is that the facts that are on the table are that employment is stronger today than it was in 2009. Growth is stronger today than it was in 2009, and those are the facts. But I also think that the debate that this will evolve to is whose plan is best for the future. I mean, that's really who has a better understanding of the problems that we face. I mean, we can't dismiss the growing gap between rich and poor in this country. It's a long-term trend that was exacerbated by the recession. But at the end of the day, I think presidents and people who want to lead this very complex nation have to have more than a superficial understanding of the problems. And also, I think the question is, whose plan is better for the future? I mean, I think we're going to get to that part of this discussion, and I think in New Orleans, I think the president just gave a great talk. Great talk.
Marc Morial, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, domestic